Welcome back. My name is Alberto Deves, and I'll be your MC for today. We have an awesome program planned out for you, but we'll go over it later as the day goes on. We want to give you a quick reminder that on your phones you can check out our webpage called gin.cms.edu.do, where you will find our conference events, all the times, the topics and locations. And even though it would be convenient to have paper copies pasted all around the school or given to you, we're trying to limit our paper waste. So please check out our website. And thank you for doing your part to make this conference the best it can be. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CMSGin and hashtag CMSGin2014. We'll now proceed to have Rocio Herzog, who will introduce our first keynote speaker.
Welcome back, and good morning. My name is Rocio Herzog, and I'm a freshman here at Carroll Morgan School. It is my honor this morning to introduce today's keynote speaker, Mr. John Liu, who is to speak to us about environmental awareness, biodiversity, but most of all, ecological recovery, with a diversity of many other topics. Mr. Liu is the director of the Environmental Education Media Projects, an award-winning documentary filmmaker, has devoted 10 years of his life to work for CBS News. He's showcased in the World Bank and the International Unit of the Conservation of Nature to talk about the importance of conserving the environment. Mr. Liu has written many articles on bringing awareness to various topics, also produced and directed films on grasslands, deserts, oceans, the list goes on. He's made many documentaries on the degradation and restoration of the ecosystem we live in, and how to maintain it unharmed, how we can help, how we can make it happen. Mr. Liu's work not only raises awareness, he finds solutions, he encourages us to follow, to create a better future for the present and forthcoming generations, to reconstruct our planet. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to our stage today's keynote speaker, Mr. Liu. Thank you.
Hello. I start slow. Okay, I need to be grateful. It's good to be here. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you to all of you for choosing to do something to help the world. If I were a Formula One race driver, I would have to wear one of those suits with lots of logos. Okay. We live on a wonderful planet. And the best evidence that we have says that this planet was a molten rock surrounded by poisonous gases. Maybe we need to turn out the lights. Is that but over prodigious time, the earth was changed into a magnificent garden. And this was done by a process, which is a biochemical photoreactive process that changes light and minerals and water into animate life, animate matter. And over in many, many generations, each generation of life has died and given up its body to nurture the earth. And this has produced the atmosphere. It has produced the fertility in the soil. And it's produced the hydrological cycle that regulates the waters, filters the waters, and it regulates the weather patterns and the climate. And this is connected to the size of the biomass, the size of the canopy, and into this wonderful earth, all different kinds of life forms emerged. If you go to church and you listen to the cosmologies from the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, you find that human beings emerged in paradise. And if you study evolution, you find that human beings emerged in paradise. Isn't that interesting? I don't see a difference. Some people see a difference, but I think that regardless of whether you're studying the science of it or the cosmology, human beings emerged in paradise. These are cheetahs nursing on the Masai Mara in Kenya. Always interesting. So, I think it's clear that the biodiversity, the power, the beauty of nature means that we emerged in paradise. This is what it's like to ride in a helicopter with the door off. Get a good pilot. And it's also useful to take gaffer's tape and tape the seat belt. You don't want to fall out. But actually, I highly recommend this. It's thrilling. And to see the strength and the power and the beauty of nature is to realize how fragile human efforts are. We build magnificent buildings and wonderful things, but they don't last very long. And nature is constantly renewed. This is interesting. This is at 4,000 meters high in the Andes. And what's interesting about this is that when the Spanish arrived, they called this Paramo, which means wasteland, because they couldn't understand what it is. But it's one of the most biodiverse and beautiful highland wetland systems on the earth. Okay. Now, in the cosmologies from the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, man sins and was cast out of paradise. And in 1995, I was sent to study the Luz Plateau. Now, this is the first picture was in Qinghai province, and the river is a river that was once known as the Mother River because all the different tribes in this region emerged in this place. And one tribe could really cook well. So they became the dominant one. I think it was their restaurants going everywhere. That's a joke. But the Luz Plateau is approximately the size of France. It's 640,000 square kilometers. And it's named for its soil type. The soil is created by the movements of glaciers in the Himalayas, and it's deposited by wind. So this is a sedimentary soil. It's very minerally rich, but it requires organic material in order to be fertile. This is the place where the early Chinese civilization formed. So the Han, the Qin, the Tang dynasties were based in this place. So if you dig around in there, you could find some interesting things. And I believe he's about to unearth something. Let's go, yes. So this is where the early Chinese built their civilization. This is to the southwest. It's a fully functional forested ecosystem. It has water, biodiversity, it's beautiful. If you go to the northeast, there's a fully functional grassland ecosystem in Mongolia. And there's evidence that it's in a mixed forest and grassland ecosystem that the Chinese race emerged. The Chinese believe that their evidence of humans and their ancestors for 1.5 million years. That's compared to 5 million years in the Rift Valley. And this place is generally believed to be the second place on Earth where people began to do agriculture. So, for thousands of years, people have lived here. They built a magnificent civilization. Some of the greatest art and culture and science came from this place. But by 1995, when I was sent there by the World Bank,
I was astounded by the degree of poverty, degradation. And I wondered, how could the Chinese people, the largest ethnic group on the planet, and my fathers and my own ancestors, come from a place that was this barren?
So it was a ruin. It was just totally devegetated, a horrible situation. And I wondered, how could we have so much evidence that it was wonderful? It was the second place on Earth where people began to do agriculture. It must have been quite wonderful. How did it turn into such a devastating environment? What happened? And it made me start a long study. It's been almost 20 years now that I've been studying this. And at the same time as this, the Chinese government was thinking, it's not fair for these people to live in poverty in this ancient place while the rest of China is getting rich. And so they decided to study this, and their work has been amazing. But what was found was that the hydrological cycle had been massively disrupted. And it turned the water from a nurturing system into kinetic energy. And this kinetic energy would grow, and it would become huge, and it would destroy the natural systems through running off. But then, because it didn't infiltrate, it wouldn't be available in the rest of the year. So they had flooding, but then the floods were followed by droughts. And this became a cycle, which was repeated over and over and over throughout historical time. And it's also the conditions which create enormous dust storms, which blanket Northeast Asia and which affect the entire Earth because they create a particulate layer in the atmosphere. So when I got there, I was fascinated, and I realized I didn't understand what was the dynamic that had caused this. And I found that if you study it, then it's understandable. They cut the trees. When the trees were gone, they tried to do agriculture on the sides of hills, which depleted the fertility. When the fertility was gone, they free-ranged goats and sheep until everything that was living there was eaten. And this disrupted the processes of photosynthesis. So you had less oxygen release and less carbon sequestration. This is very important. And you had much less canopy, so that the respiration had been reduced and you had lost the microclimates below these canopies. I'll put in a plug for my workshop. We're going to talk about the science of this in another session. And then they altered the fertility, because when the biomass was reduced, it stopped the accumulation of organic matter. This altered the microbiologic communities in the soil, and it massively changed the fertility. And so they became poor, desperately poor. And the more they tried to do the same things, the poorer they became. This is one of the few places in China where the people were too poor to marry. So people just lived in kind of sadness. They burnt everything. They burnt all the wood, they burnt the crop wastes, they burnt animal dung, anything that they could for fuel. So I think this is a trajectory which has actually been followed by all countries. 10 to 12,000 years ago, this type of agriculture, slash and burn agriculture, began. This is in Ethiopia just a few years ago. So in fact, you can still find this. You can still find this in Central and South America. When you do this, you reduce biodiversity, you reduce biomass, and you reduce the accumulation of organic matter. This is completely counter to the evolutionary trends that created paradise. And so paradise is lost. And every civilization that followed this trajectory ended in the same way. So if we don't learn from history, we're forced to repeat it. We're doing the same thing now. Think about urban and industrial landscapes, and think of the relationship between biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter in industrial and urban landscapes. Think about industrial agriculture, and think about the relationship between biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter. The findings from study in all continents suggests you cannot reduce biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter without destroying the basic functions which we depend on for life. So, we've been working on I think this needs audio. Oh, don't stop it. It just needs audio. Yeah. Oh, no, back. You're in the wrong place now. Go back. Okay. Now it needs audio. Oh, no, back. We're going to do this until it... Go back twice. Now go forward. No. Go forward. Yes. Don't touch anything. Let it roll. Okay, we need audio. Here we go.
One thing that became apparent early on is the connection between damaged environments and human poverty. In many parts of the world, there's been a vicious cycle. Continuous use of the land has led to subsistence agriculture. And generation by generation, this has further degraded the soils. The vital question we have to ask is, can this destructive process be reversed? When I first filmed Mr. Tafuya and his colleagues back in 1995, I had no idea this initiative could achieve such dramatic results.
So that transitions from September 1995 2009. We made this film for the
The
Copenhagen.
effort that people put into converting their slopes into terraces has resulted in a marked increase in agricultural productivity. The higher yields are directly related to the return of natural vegetation in the surrounding ecological bed. As a result of its success, the lessons learned from the Luz Plateau rehabilitation are now being applied all over China. But could such projects work elsewhere in less centrally controlled societies with fewer resources and different soils? Ethiopia, perhaps more than any other country, has come to symbolize the vulnerability of humankind to environmental catastrophe. This is a country whose problems have been increased by war and civil conflict. And now, human-induced climate change is predicted to make matters worse. As on the Luz Plateau, centuries of subsistence farming practices have stripped the land of natural vegetation. The dry gullies bear the scars of flash floods.
These gullies are evidence of the enormous power of runoff during the rainy season. Without vegetation cover on the hillsides, when the rains come, the water doesn't soak into the ground, but flows away in a flood. Then it's not available for agriculture during the rest of the year. This leads to drought, and famously for Ethiopia, famine.
But just as I witnessed in China, there is hope that the situation here can be reversed. In just 6 years, Professor Legessa Nagash and local villagers have transformed a severely eroded terrain by planting indigenous trees and plants. Almost miraculously, a clear flowing stream has emerged where once there was a muddy trickle.
How is it that it's possible for you to get the stream to flow throughout the year? It is because of the vegetation cover, which has been regenerating on this mountain. This water is maintained in the landscape because as soon as rain falls on the canopy on this vegetation, that rain then infiltrates gradually to the ground, ending up with this steady flow of this river.
If we were to restore the vast areas of the planet where we humans have degraded the soils, just think what an impact we would have in taking carbon out of the atmosphere. As much as a quarter of the world's land mass has been degraded, and much could be rehabilitated in the way we have seen on the Luz Plateau. And we've only just begun to recognize the real value of natural capital. Surely investing in the recovery of damaged environments is a cost-effective way of solving many of the problems we face today.
What we've seen in China, in Africa, and around the world is that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. If we can transfer the capital, the technology, and empower the local people to restore their own environment, it'll have enormous benefits. Restoration can sequester carbon, reduce biodiversity loss, mitigate against flooding, drought, and famine. It can ensure food security for people who are now chronically hungry. Why don't we do this on a global scale?
So I think what we learned is it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. And I think that this is the great work of our time. This is what everyone who's alive on the earth today needs to understand, that the sustainability and survival of humanity is based on biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter. not on iPhones or computers or airplanes. This is a technique simply to bring back and stop the movement of dunes. This is a very labor-intensive, but it's a very simple.
Dynamic gardener, the farmer, is really feeding the soil with compost, with organic material. We give the manure, we give the compost to the soil, and there we feed the life in the soil, all the microorganisms, all the earthworms. And that means that they will see that the right nutrition is available for the plants, not only from the compost, but also from the soil. So this is a compost heap which we put up with that material for 2 months ago. And the first thing which happens is that it turns warm. And if they put up the material in the right way, with the right moisture and air and so on, all those beans, they can by themselves. Here they are.
Yeah.
Here there is no warmth, but lots of organic material, and they have to do. So they are here.
Yeah.
But after some time they will have done their work, and who knows, perhaps they go over there. The worms and other beetles and microorganisms have been eating all of it and produced this wonderful soil. That's in a way the secret of organic material. It improves the soil. It's not only nutrition, it's also structure. And it keeps nutrition, it keeps the water and the air in the soil.
Make sure your soils look like that. That was Thomas Luthi, the director of Demeter. This is Dr. Renee Holler. He takes completely ruined
The most important
landscapes.
thing is to, as fast as possible, get vegetation to grow. And that can be again done in very adverse areas.
He can make the Garden of Eden out
What
of it.
happened now, there's hardly a place in these quarries down there which has no vegetation. There's grass, there's trees, everything. Before, it was 2.5 square kilometers of desert.
So all over the world, we're finding that the techniques exist for restoration. It's just that the intention of society is different. Many people are thinking that what's controlling the world is financial flows. Well, those financial flows are artificial and kind of theoretical. But this is real. This is where your water, your food, your air, and your energy all come from. We're suggesting that more and more people move into a restoration economy, because a restoration economy is going to give real, lasting results, whereas the financial economy is in serious danger of collapsing worldwide. And sorry to tell you this, but if you think you're going to work to get a job, to get a degree, to get a job, you might want to rethink this. Because if you're getting an elite education, your task is to make sure the society can survive. And what we're seeing in this study is that some of the things that we thought are wrong, that many mistakes have been made in the world. And these mistakes have led to the problems that we have. So I'm very happy that you've chosen to make an action plan for climate change. But I really want to see what your plan is, because you're taking on a task which is extremely difficult. But all over the world, we're finding that people can do this. And interestingly, the poorest people in the world are sometimes the best place to increase organic matter, increase biomass, and increase biodiversity. That means they're very important. They're valuable. And what we have to realize is that they've been treated pretty badly for quite a long time. And in fact, all people are equal. And we need to recognize that and make sure it's in our action plan. So I'll just show you, we're working with people in India. This is in India.
In a world which is increasingly dominated by economic priorities, Foundation for Ecological Security, FES, believes that human society is a part of a larger ecological whole, a larger ecological planet. We are just one of the various living forms. We believe in the biophysical infrastructure as the true infrastructure for rural economies. By that I mean soil, water, moisture, nutrients, biodiversity. This is fundamental for farming to survive, for the resilience of farming.
Everyone in India depends on the ecological function of the land. Fertile soils, stable water resources, and biodiversity. But vast numbers of the most marginalized people depend entirely on commonly held community land for every aspect of their lives.
There is a huge conflict between communities' initiative, communities' resource, and the growing demands of the market. So that's a clear misbalance between both the things.
If this contradiction is not resolved, then hundreds of millions of people could lose their fundamental human rights and their livelihoods.
What you see is privatization of commons, and more often than not, such a privatization goes in the favor of the rich people, leaving the poor outside the focus, excluding them by very design.
India, with a growing population, already over 1 billion people, has a choice to either engage the rural poor in positive, effective, and productive land management, or to exclude them and ensure that hundreds of millions of landless people suffer needlessly, and the land will be further degraded.
We have not been able to take populations dependent on agriculture to alternative occupations at a rapid rate. So now the question is, within agriculture, what kind of shifts can take place? What is possible?
Community-led conservation of common lands, coordinated by the Foundation for Ecological Security, is proving that the people can be effective in restoring ecosystem function and productivity to the land.
बंदा खोद गया तो पाता को मिलने कूड़ा भी गंदा दिन को पानी जाया तो कूड़ा भी पानी हो गया माके धंधा का माके चारों हो जो माके तो मैं 20 बीता माके मगर सारी बकरियां आश्रम थोड़ा माके मैं खीना पहली बटा ही था तो मगर सारा हो गया इन्हीं ने पौधा हो गया रोकड़ा हो गया.
This is a village called Hastinapur of the Panchayat Kakaliya Ghati, and this particular place that we are standing is the boundary of a common land which is owned by the village Hastinapur, and we can see the photographs. It was just like this. This was the status when we started, absolutely barren. You can see this picture with stones and pebbles without a single blade of grass. And now you can see the ecological restoration process is in front of us, and is the transformation of this degraded land into a very much productive land for the livestock dependent community of Bhilwara.
Ensuring that the community continues to conserve the land depends on whether their rights are protected.
तो अगर इसकी उसमें एक्सटेंड नहीं होगी तो उसी प्रकार जो खान माफिया है या कोई भी हो तो इस पूरी जो इतने दिन तक कामों में 25 साल तक जो मेहनत की है मेहनत का कोई ढंग नहीं.
Most of the policies which are required are actually there. There is a serious drawback in its effective translation to the ground. And I think most of the main reason for that is the government assumes that it has to do it, whereas it only has to enable people to do it.
कि भाई आने कभी बिगाड़ करावे कोई रोग काटे कुछ कहीं डांडो जोर देवे तो मैंने मेहमान ने इन्हें केवो भाई हमने जरूर करम से तो मैंने मेहमान ने कल तो जुगे तो सुबह ने खाना दे दिया।
पहले दुबई की बात को नहीं मानते थे, अभी जो औरत बात करती है उसको मानते थे, पहले जो औरत बात करते हैं उसको मैं तो मानते थे, लेकिन अभी जो औरत बात करती है उसको मैं तो मानते।
In India, when women are empowered, the land is fiercely protected.
बस जन पाला जन का पेड़ा ने बड़ा किया, वो पेड़ा ने बड़ा किया पाला बान वो भी लगाया, अब बान तो जब पेड़ा ने काटता है बाहर गाँव का आया है वो मेरे को तंगी करता है, बाहर का तंगी करता, अब ये मरा हमारा फिर उसको मेरे घर दबा ले जाएंगे।
The people will need all the courage and the help that they can get.
The more and more industries that is coming up, the more and more area that is going in the mines is not helping the cause of commerce, because all the effort the community is making to protect whatever little commerce that they have, it's coming under severe pressure.
The fact that the modern economies have failed to recognize is that the ecological function of an intact ecosystem is more important and has more value for everyone than mining or manufacturing. Because functional ecosystems produce air, water, food, and energy, without which we cannot live. One effective measure in protecting the community's lands has been the appointment of forest wardens.
Success in communities' initiative in forest protection, we could see the spin-off in water resources. The way the community now govern their water, the way the community now govern their other natural capitals, natural resources, talks about how resources are interlinked and how community efforts in governing this resource are actually creating a favorable situation for the community members and the livelihood at the total. This whole sense of belongingness with the resource improved, the sense of community's ownership with the resource improved, and eventually help them in building good relationship with their neighbors, which was not the case earlier when there was constant fight with the neighbors and the issues of resource sharing.
ତଳ ଅଞ୍ଚଳ ଯୋଉଟା ଘାସ କେବେ ହଉନଥିଲା ନଡ଼ିଆ ବାଡ଼ିରେ ବି ଫାଟି ଯାଉଥିଲା ସେଇଠି ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାର ଘାସ ଆସିଛି ଆଉ ସେଠି ଝର ମଧ୍ୟ ବାହାରିଛି ଆଉ ଯୋଉଟାକି ଏଇ ଅଞ୍ଚଳ ପାଇଁ ଏହାର ପ୍ରଭାବ ଯୋଗୁଁ ଗାଁ ଭିତରେ ଯାହା ହଉନା କାହିଁକି ଜଙ୍ଗଲକୁ ରକ୍ଷା ପାଇଁ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କ ମନରେ ଗୋଟେ ଆଗ୍ରହ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହେଇଛି।
Water retained in the West is not essentially because it increases the effort. Because the whole community made an effort, the amount of temple has been rising in the West.
Similar results can also be found in the much drier regions of South India.
ఎక్కడ చూసినా నీళ్ళు ఉంటాయి, ఎక్కడ చూసినా నీళ్ళు ఉన్నట్టు బోర్వెల్స్ అనమాట. నీళ్ళతోనే వ్యవసాయం చేతులు చెట్టు చేసుకొని వ్యవసాయం చేసుకుంటారు. కొంచెం ప్రయోజనం పెరిగి కొంచెం పీయూసీ లెవెల్కి నీళ్ళు మాయం. నీళ్ళు ఎందుకు మాయం అయిపోయినాయని చెప్పి మాకు అదే టెన్షన్ ఉంది. బోర్వెల్ స్టార్ట్ చేస్తాం. బోర్వెల్ స్టార్ట్ చేసిన తర్వాత 340-800 అడుగులు కూడా చూస్తున్నాం నీళ్ళు మాకు అనుమానం.
నీళ్ళు అయిపోయా మన బోర్డు వేసుకుంటే 5 నుంచి 800 వరకు అవే మనకి ఇప్పుడు నిత్యము ఈ సమస్య నుంచే.
Recharging the water table depends on the extent of the vegetative cover and the amounts of organic matter in the soil.
After protection of this Gomada or the grazing land, after the biophysical intervention, they are finding that changes in this tank. Before last year, there is no water as such. After rainy season, hardly 4 to 5 months water will be there. Now they are finding water throughout the year.
Altogether, there are about 31 forest protection committees along the fringes of this forest range, and they have all been involved in protecting and managing and regenerating and restoring this forest.
ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ బోర్వెల్స్ అంత ఎక్కువగా మనం బోర్వెల్స్ పొందుతున్నాం.
ఎవరైతే ఈ ఇంప్లిమెంట్ మన చేయనమ్మ జనాభా అందరిని చేర్పించి ఒక ఊర్లో గ్రామ సభ చేసి వాళ్ళకి ముందు మన చుట్టాలు ఇప్పుడు పోయింటే కష్టాలు వచ్చింది అందరూ చేరి మన నీళ్ళు వ్యవసాయం కోసం బెంగళూరుకి వీళ్ళు పనులకు పోతారు. ఇప్పుడు ఏడాది కొద్దిగా పండగకి దేవకి 100 నెట్టుకొని తిరిగి వస్తాము. అప్పుడు కూలీనాలు చేసుకొని నిలబెట్టినాము. అప్పటి వరకు బెంగళూరుకి ఎవరే దాని పనులకు పోకుండా సిటీకి మార్గాలకు పనులకు పోకుండా ఇక్కడే ఉండి వ్యవసాయం చేసుకునేది అనుకోవాలి.
Ensuring the rights of the people to live and work in their common lands in rural India, and giving them the knowledge and ability to restore degraded landscapes is a task that is as enormous as it is important.
In terms of institutions, I think the FES has done tremendous work strengthening the institutions of governance at the local level. They could become a very effective means of delivery, both in terms of restoring the ecosystems and also restoring the livelihoods.
As humanity faces the threat of climate change, there is no more important task than removing carbon from the atmosphere. Rural people in India and around the world are often the last to be valued or appreciated, but they have the greatest ability of anyone on the earth to sequester carbon in increased vegetation and in soils with high levels of organic matter. In recognition of its long and effective service, the United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification presented the highest honor of the 2013 Land for Life Awards to India's Foundation for Ecological Security. That's my email for those of you working on the action plan. If you want any information, we have lots and lots of information. Thank you very much.